She stood in the rain, barefoot, dirty, and invisible to the world. Hundreds walked past her like she didn't exist, until one man stopped. He was a billionaire CEO, and he saw something in her hands that made his heart stop. A photo. His missing sister, holding a baby. And that's when everything changed. Welcome to Hearts and Billions, where the rich meet the broken. And one moment changes everything. Love, loss, redemption, and all in one story. Subscribe to feel every heartbeat. Please kindly take me to 1,000 subscribers. It was a cold, grey morning. The streets were full of people rushing to work. Cars honked, shoes tapped on the pavement, and not a single person looked down. In the middle of the sidewalk by a trash bin sat a little girl. Her clothes were torn, her hair messy, her face covered in dirt. She was maybe 8 or 9 years old. She didn't cry. She didn't beg loudly. She just sat there, holding an old photo close to her chest. Some people glanced at her, then looked away quickly. Others covered their noses as they walked past. A woman pulling her child whispered, "Stay away from her." But the girl didn't move. She stared at the photo in her hands, a picture of a smiling woman holding a baby. That woman was her mother. She didn't know where her mother was now. She only knew one thing. She had to find her. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Her feet were red from walking. But still she sat there, waiting, hoping someone would see her. But no one did. Not yet. Victor Harlan stepped out of his black SUV. He wore a clean suit, shiny shoes, and expensive glasses. People knew his name, one of the richest men in the city. He was always in a hurry. Meetings, phones, deals. That was his world. As he walked down the busy street, he barely noticed anything around him. But then something made him stop. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a small figure sitting by the trash bin. At first, he ignored her like everyone else. But something in him paused. He turned his head again. The girl looked familiar. Not her face, but the way she was sitting. The way she was holding something tightly. It reminded him of someone. For just a second, their eyes met. Victor froze. His chest felt tight, like something important had just brushed past him. He shook it off and kept walking. But 10 steps later, he stopped again. Something didn't feel right. He turned around, but the girl was gone. And all she had left behind was a photo lying in the wet street. Victor bent down, picked it up, and looked at it closely. And his hands began to shake. Victor stood in the middle of the sidewalk, holding the photo with both hands. People walked past him, annoyed that he was in their way. But he didn't move. His eyes were glued to the picture. It showed a young woman with soft eyes and a kind smile. She was holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. The baby's eyes were bright, and its tiny hand reached up toward the woman's face. Victor couldn't breathe for a moment. The woman in the photo looked exactly like his sister, Clara, but Clara had been gone for almost 10 years. She had disappeared without a trace. Everyone thought she had died or run away forever. Victor had searched for her for years and failed. But now here she was, staring back at him through a wrinkled, dirty photograph left behind by a homeless little girl. He turned around, looking everywhere. "Where is she?" he whispered to himself, spinning in circles, searching the sidewalk. But the girl was gone, like smoke. Victor rushed back to his car. "Find her," he told his driver, holding up the photo. "Search every corner of this street. I want to know who she is. I want to know where she went." He looked down at the picture again. His hands were shaking. Who was that girl? And why did she have this photo? Victor couldn't focus. Back in his SUV, he kept staring at the photo in his hands. The edges were torn, and the image had faded a little, but he knew what he saw. It was his sister. And if the girl had this photo, there had to be a reason. He leaned forward. "Drive slowly," he told his driver. "Check every alley, every shop. Every corner." They moved through the busy streets. Victor rolled the windows down, scanning the sidewalks. His heart was racing. He couldn't explain why, but something inside him knew. This wasn't random. This girl was connected to his past, and maybe to a future he never expected. He stopped the car again and stepped out. He walked into a food stall. "Did you see a little girl here?" he asked the vendor. "Dirty clothes, holding a photo." The man frowned. "Which one?" "We see too many." Victor sighed and moved on. Next, he asked a security guard at a bank entrance. Then an old woman sweeping in front of a shop. One by one they all shook their heads, until finally a young boy selling water bottles pointed toward a narrow alley. "She sleeps there sometimes," the boy said. "Near the bridge, alone." Victor's eyes followed the direction. Under the fading light of the evening sun, he saw the edge of the bridge, cold, dark, forgotten. He thanked the boy and got back in the SUV. "Take me there," he said quietly. He didn't know what he'd find, but something deep in his chest whispered, "You're close." The SUV slowed near the edge of the old bridge. The city's lights blinked in the distance, but here it felt like a different world, quiet, cold, forgotten. Victor stepped out of the car. His polished shoes touched the dirt-covered ground. The air smelled of smoke and damp concrete. Somewhere nearby, water dripped slowly from a broken pipe. He walked carefully toward the dark space under the bridge, and then he saw her. The little girl was curled up on a flattened cardboard box, her thin arms wrapped tightly around a small bag. She was using it like a pillow. Her knees were pulled to her chest. She wasn't sleeping, not really. Her eyes were half open, watching him with fear and confusion. Victor stopped a few feet away, afraid to scare her. He spoke gently. "Hey, don't be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't move. "I think you dropped this," he said, slowly showing her the photo. Her eyes widened, but she didn't say a word. She clutched the bag tighter. Victor crouched down to her level. "Who is she?" he asked softly. "The woman in the photo." "Is she your mom?" The girl looked away, lips trembling. "She's gone," she whispered. Victor's chest tightened. "What's your name?" "Layla." He nodded slowly. "Layla, my name is Victor. I think I might know who your mother is." She blinked. "You do?" "I'm not sure," he said, his voice cracking. "But if I'm right, you and I might be family." A tear rolled down Layla's cheek. She didn't know what to say. No one had spoken to her this kindly in a very long time. Victor took off his jacket and gently placed it over her shoulders. "Come with me," he said softly. "You don't have to sleep here anymore." Layla hesitated, but after a few long seconds, she reached out and took his hand. And that was the first time someone had held her hand in months. Victor helped Layla into the back seat of his SUV. She held onto his jacket tightly, her eyes darting around the car, like she didn't trust it yet. The seat felt too soft, the smell too clean. She'd never been in a car like this before. As they drove, Victor kept glancing at her in the mirror. She looked so small, so tired. Her cheeks were pale and her lips were dry. He didn't want to scare her with too many questions. Not yet. They pulled up at a private hospital. Nurses looked surprised when Victor carried in a dirty, barefoot girl, but they said nothing. They knew who he was. Inside the exam room, Layla sat on the edge of the bed, legs swinging nervously. A nurse gave her warm water and crackers. She drank slowly, unsure if it was a trick. She was used to hunger. She didn't trust kindness. Victor stayed beside her the whole time. The doctor checked her heart, her breathing, her temperature.
"She's malnourished," the doctor said gently.
But no broken bones, just exhausted. She hasn't been cared for in a long time. Victor swallowed hard. "Help her!" "Whatever she needs." They gave Layla a bath, clean pajamas, a warm blanket. She came out looking like a different child, but her eyes, those tired, frightened eyes, still held the pain of the street. Victor sat with her in the quiet room. He handed her back the photo. "Was this taken a long time ago?" he asked. She nodded. "Before my mom disappeared." Victor leaned in gently. "Do you know her full name?" Layla hesitated. Clara Hill." Victor's breath caught in his throat. That was his sister's name. He stood up slowly, eyes stinging. "I need to make a call," he said. Stepping out of the room behind him, Layla curled into the soft blanket, still holding the photo. Still not knowing, her life was about to change forever. Victor sat in the hospital hallway, holding his phone tightly. His hands were sweating. His heart hadn't stopped racing since Layla said her mother's name. Clara Hill. It couldn't be a coincidence. He called his private investigator immediately. "I need you to find out everything about a girl named Layla. And her mother, Clara Hill. Start with hospitals, shelters, anything you can find." Then he made another call to his private doctor. "I need a DNA test," he said. "Tonight." That same night, While Layla slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, a nurse gently collected a saliva sample. Victor provided his as well. He couldn't sleep. He kept pacing the hospital lobby. In his hand was the photo, the same one Layla had dropped. He stared at it over and over. The woman's eyes were unmistakable. It had to be Clara. But where had she been all these years? Why hadn't she called? Why was her daughter alone on the streets? The next afternoon, the doctor came in, holding a sealed envelope. His face was serious. Victor stood. "Well," he asked quietly. The doctor nodded. "She's your niece. There's no mistake." Victor's knees almost buckled. He sat down slowly, staring at the floor, heart pounding in his ears. All this time, his sister had been alive, and her daughter, his own flesh and blood, had been sleeping under bridges, hungry, alone. He felt guilt, anger, relief, hope all at once. He walked back into the hospital room. Layla looked up at him from the bed. He sat down gently beside her and smiled, though his eyes were full of tears. "I have something to tell you," he whispered. She tilted her head. "What is it?" He reached for her hand. "You're not alone anymore. You're my family." For the first time in days, Layla smiled. It was small, unsure, but real. Victor held her hand gently, like it was the most precious thing in the world. But his heart wasn't at peace yet. He had found his niece. Now he had to find his sister. Victor's private investigator worked through the night. By morning they had something, a shelter report from nearly 9 years ago. A woman named Clara Hill had checked in using a false last name. She'd been pregnant at the time. Scared, hiding. Victor read every line of the report with shaking hands. It said Clara had run from an abusive partner. She had no money, no phone, no help. And she refused to tell anyone where she had come from. One staff member at the shelter remembered her. She said Clara had cried every night, whispering the name Victor in her sleep, but never reached out. She thought she had to protect her baby by disappearing. Victor's throat tightened. All these years while he was building businesses, flying private jets and living in luxury. His sister was running for her life. Another tip led them to a tiny town 2 hours away. Victor got into his car and drove there himself. He didn't bring security. He didn't tell anyone. He found her working at a small diner, older now, tired, wearing a worn-out apron and scrubbing tables. He walked in. She looked up. Her eyes widened. The plate in her hand slipped and shattered on the floor. "Victor," she whispered, frozen. He didn't speak. He walked straight to her and hugged her. They both broke down, right there in front of strangers. 10 years of silence, gone. Clara kept saying, "I'm sorry. I thought disappearing was the only way to keep her safe." Victor whispered through tears, "She's been living on the streets, Clara, but I found her. She's safe now, and she still loves you." Clara collapsed into his arms, and for the first time in a decade, she felt like she could finally breathe. A week later, the black SUV pulled up to a grand iron gate. Layla sat in the back seat, her eyes wide with wonder. She wore new clothes, soft, warm, clean. Her hair had been brushed gently by a kind nurse. In her lap sat a small teddy bear. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand the whole way. Clara hadn't stopped crying since Victor brought her home from the diner. Not because she was sad, but because she never thought she'd feel safe again. Now she was going home. The gate opened slowly. Layla looked out the window and gasped. A giant white house stood at the top of the hill, surrounded by trees, flowers, and fountains. It looked like something out of a storybook. "Is this where we're going?" she asked softly. Victor turned from the front seat and smiled. "This is your home now." Layla didn't speak. Her eyes filled with tears. Inside the house, a maid greeted them kindly. "Welcome, Miss Layla, Miss Clara." Rooms were already prepared, a soft pink bedroom for Layla, with books and stuffed animals and fairy lights. Clara had her own space, too, with a warm bed and fresh clothes. That night, they all had dinner together at a long wooden table. Layla had never eaten at a table with silverware before. She tried to hold the fork properly. Victor noticed and helped her without saying a word, just a smile. After dinner, Layla played in the garden. She ran barefoot through the grass, this time not because she didn't have shoes, but because she wanted to feel the earth under her feet. Victor stood at the balcony, watching her with quiet joy. He had once passed her on the street like everyone else, but now She was the reason his world made sense again. Months passed. Layla had grown healthier, brighter. She laughed more now. She ran through the halls of the mansion with her teddy bear, and sometimes even sang when she thought no one was listening. Clara smiled more too. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. Her hands were steadier, her heart lighter. Victor watched them both with quiet pride. He didn't need to say it out loud, but it was clear. They had become the family he never knew he needed. One morning, Victor sat alone in his office. He stared at the photo, the same wrinkled, dirt-stained photo Layla had once dropped on the street. But now it was framed in gold, clean, protected, honored. In the picture, Clara, young and hopeful, holding baby Layla. He placed it on his desk where he could see it every day. When guests came into his office and noticed it, they always asked, "What's the story behind that?" Victor would smile quietly and say, "Everyone ignored her. I almost did too. But that little girl, she saved me." Because the truth was, he thought he had everything. Money, success, power. But all it took was one dirty girl sitting in the rain, holding a photo, to show him what really mattered. 5 years had passed. The mansion was still quiet and grand, but something had changed. It no longer felt cold. It felt like a home. In the garden, a teenage Layla walked beside Victor, now a little older, a little slower, but happier than he had ever been. She wore a school uniform. Her shoes were clean. Her eyes were bright. "Uncle Victor," she asked, smiling, "do you think people can really change?" He looked at her. "I don't think," he said softly. "I know." That weekend, Layla stood on a small stage at her school, holding a microphone. She looked out at the crowd and said, "Once I lived under a bridge. People passed me like I was invisible. But one person turned around and changed my whole life. Sometimes love finds you in the places you least expect. And sometimes all it takes is for someone to stop and see you." The crowd clapped. Clara, sitting beside Victor, wiped a tear from her cheek. Victor smiled as he looked down at his watch, the same one that stopped working the day he met her. He never fixed it. Because that was the moment time, and life truly began again.